The story begins with Bear having coffee with his best friend. The clumsy waitress Nikki, Bear's national crush, was there. Bear practiced confessing his feelings to her, but because of his shyness, Bear stammered. He said Nikki was the only one kind to him since he moved to the city. He then reminisced about old memories. He then suddenly ended with, "I'm afraid of losing Nikki," which sounded cringy. Despite all the practice, Bear always thought, in real life, Nikki would never accept someone like me. After hearing that prepared speech, Ruthie and Ian were speechless. They both said confessing like that was so embarrassing. Bear got angry and refused to practice anymore. He felt his self-esteem was deeply hurt. He ignored Ian, who kept pushing him to open up. Ruthie then suggested buying a small gift, like flowers or sweets that Nikki would like, but Ian dismissed it, calling the idea so basic. Finally, the waitress left to do her work. With just the two of them, Ian pressed Bear. He asked if Bear had ever flirted with Nikki. He then provoked Bear, telling him to call Nikki Weird Nikki. That was a nickname from when she was bullied years ago. Bear immediately refused. He said it would be like rubbing salt in her wounds, but Ian insisted. He said it would break the awkward atmosphere. Then he suggested hanging out casually. Who would have thought when Bear dragged himself home, he found his beloved cat Sandy dead in the living room. Sandy had accidentally eaten a pile of drugs he left lying around. Bear completely broke down. He cried uncontrollably. Then he scrolled through Nikki's social media for comfort. Just then, Crack called, inviting him to a bar that night. Bear planned to politely decline. He was busy dealing with the mess at home, but Nikki insisted. She said the whole group needed his cool head. They needed him to carry the team in a gaming tournament. She also confided that she planned to quit her job in 2 weeks. She felt she had run her course there. Hearing that, Bear immediately changed his mind and decided to go. What was there to wait for? Before arriving at her bar, Bear stopped by a store to find a gift for Nikki. He initially considered buying some crystal necklaces, but he ended up picking up some wishbones. These spiritual items were said to grant wishes if broken in half. The saleswoman added that many customers complained they thought the wishbones were truly effective. Bear stopped short and asked if they were real. Arriving and seeing everyone chatting, Bear kept winking at Ian. He signaled that he would finally confess his feelings soon. Unexpectedly, observant Nikki saw this. She invited Bear to get drinks together. Bear immediately chose a pina colada because he didn't drink alcohol. Nikki joked that she liked guys who connected with their feminine side. Then she pressed him, asking what he was so busy with that afternoon to ditch their plans. Bear tried to gloss over it with a few excuses, but she called him out, saying he was probably just binging movies at home. This made them both laugh heartily. But just as Bear was about to mention the gift, Ian suddenly rushed over and cut him off. He told a random story about a gun hidden in Saja's dad's safe. The conversation was immediately derailed, and then Saja showed up, making Bear lose his golden opportunity to speak up. When they were alone, Bear tearfully told Saja about Sandy's death. Saja was both shocked and sympathetic. She hugged him to comfort him. After the game, the whole group left. Nikki sighed, utterly exhausted, and just wanted to go home to bed. While Ian kept pushing to continue partying, Bear seized the moment. He offered to drive his crush home. Before leaving, Nikki borrowed money from the group. Soon as she had the money, Nikki quickly ran out. She gave it to a homeless man outside the bar. Bear watched her with an enamored look. It was as if he had just fallen for the love of his life. On the way home, Nikki offered her condolences about Sandy. She told Bear to call her anytime he felt sad. Then they talked about Nikki quitting her job. She confessed she no longer found joy in her work. She wanted to do something different, especially right. She wanted to experience a true love story, not just a typical romance. Bear was confused and didn't quite understand, so Nikki remained silent for a moment. Then she unexpectedly confided that Bear was the only person she could freely share these random thoughts with. She thanked him for always being kind, even when she seemed distant from everyone else. Sensing the opportune moment, Bear immediately pulled out the gift, but Nikki's reaction was completely unexpected. She called the gift disgusting and suddenly started trembling. Bear also said she was acting strange. Then they continued in suffocating silence until they reached Nikki's doorstep. Nikki then teased Bear about Saja flirting with him all night. She asked if Bear had any feelings for Saja. He said he only considered her a close friend. Nikki laughed and said Saja was very obvious when she liked someone. But if she liked someone, nobody would ever know. Just as they were about to say goodbye, Bear tried to gather his courage to confess his love, but he got too scared. He stammered, saying he forgot what he was going to say. Then he changed the subject. He started talking about the kid who used to bully Nikki in school. She immediately said the kid was actually head over heels for her, but she didn't care. In a state of extreme panic and anxiety, Bear accidentally called her Crazy Nikki. This made her very offended. She moved closer to the car and asked him directly, "Do you like me?" The critical question froze Bear for 5 seconds. The opportunity was right there, but he cowardly implied he didn't like her. Nikki was disappointed and immediately went inside, overwhelmed with despair and pain. Bear rummaged through his backpack. He looked for the magic wishbones he had just bought. As he unwrapped them, a strange melody played. He broke one in half and wished Nikki would love him more than anyone else in the world. As he was about to start the engine and leave, Bear saw Nikki still staring at him from her porch. She immediately ran back back and asked if the gift he had earlier was for her. Bear lied and said he had forgotten it at home, but Nikki said it was fine. She then surprisingly invited him inside for a drink. Then she said Bear probably didn't want to go back to his empty house, so he should stay and hang out to cheer up. Bear started to feel something was off. Nikki constantly appeared flustered. Her behavior was erratic, like stormy weather. Seeing Bear hesitate to come in, she quickly jumped into the passenger seat. She then cried, saying she didn't want to be alone tonight. Her father was dying, and she couldn't bear to step inside her house. Bear felt sorry for her, so he waited for her at his apartment. But as soon as they arrived, Nikki started doing creepy, perverse things. She sniffed the air, saying the place smelled entirely of Bear. Then she brazenly went straight into his bedroom. Bear was confused, not understanding what was happening, but he politely told her to stay as long as she wanted. He advised her to rest. Unexpectedly, Nikki finished with, "Sleep with me tonight." Bear felt both worried and thrilled, though he felt a bit uneasy watching her undress as if she were in her own home. As they lay next to each other, Nikki rested her head on Bear's shoulder. She said she really needed this. This made Bear's heart race and his legs tremble. Suddenly, she turned and kissed him passionately, but the romantic atmosphere was immediately shattered. Nikki screamed in fright and fell to the floor. She cried hysterically and stammered apologies. She said she had just seen something horrifying, but she didn't explain what it was. Then she said she just had a panic attack. She then sobbed, forcing Bear to comfort her for a while. He then decided to sleep on the floor next to the bed, but after all those terrifying events, how could he possibly sleep? So Bear got up and turned on his computer. He immediately looked up information about those mysterious wishbones. It was clear that ever since he broke the wishbone, Nikki had become a completely different, wild persona. While scrolling past one-star reviews criticizing the product, he stumbled upon a message from an account. It confidently claimed these wishbones really worked, and they had completely changed their lives. This made Bear even more nervous. So when he crept back to the room, he saw Nikki was awake. She had been waiting there. The next morning, he woke up to an empty spot beside him. Bear dragged himself to the kitchen. He was hit by a sight that made him want to faint. Sandy's body was surrounded by large flowers and huge candles. It looked exactly like a makeshift altar. Immediately after, Nikki appeared in an elaborate outfit, ready for work. She acted completely normal, as if nothing had happened. At work, while the boss was assigning tasks, Bear snuck off to a corner to gossip with Ian. His best friend was curious, wanting to know if anything happened last night. He had seen them both arrive in the same car this morning. Bear honestly confessed that he had just experienced the strangest night of his life. Ian directly asked if anything adult had happened. Bear said no, but admitted everything felt off as they were whispering. Bear felt a chill down his spine. He saw Nikki standing far away, staring intently. It was as if she suspected them of bad-mouthing, so he confided in Ian. He said Nikki must be going through severe psychological issues. Her behavior was truly alarming. According to her, it was all because her father had terminal cancer, but Bear had a feeling some dark force was pulling the string. It wasn't that simple. Bear further explained that Nikki seemed to be manipulating herself mentally. First, she would passionately kiss him. Then she would immediately turn around and cry hysterically. It was as if she herself was terrified of her own senseless actions. He also said she looked like she was afraid of herself. It was as if she only occasionally regained lucidity. She would then realize things were going too far. After work, Nikki approached Bear's car, but she dropped a bombshell. Ian would escort her home tonight. A little later, Bear called Ian. He said he had just Googled mental instability symptoms. They matched Nikki exactly. As they were talking, there was a frantic knocking at the door. He opened the door. Bear froze, seeing Nikki standing right there. She apologized. She confessed that last night she'd accidentally taken some pills with beer and alcohol. That's why she was so messed up. Her father's illness had completely devastated her. That's why her mind wasn't normal. But she stressed that she never thought Bear was someone who would take advantage of her. After a few hesitant seconds, Nikki suddenly revealed Bear was the most important person in her life. She knew he had secretly loved her all this time. Bear's heart pounded when he heard this. He bravely asked, "Do you have feelings for me?" Nikki nodded immediately. She said she'd had a crush on him since Christmas. Bear sealed the deal. He said he loved her to death. They officially became a couple. They entered a passionate phase of dating. They were inseparable. They showed affection constantly. They cared for each other, but too much of anything isn't good. Nikki's intensity began to suffocate Bear. He felt breathless. During a fun restaurant date, Bear accidentally asked about Nikki's father's health. Immediately, she turned cold. She said she didn't want to get involved with that. Just then, Bear's phone vibrated wildly. Ian was calling repeatedly, but Bear ignored it. A moment later, Nikki started showing signs of confusion. Her words contradicted earlier statements. It was as if she had short-term memory loss. Seeing Ian call again, Bear finally answered. On the other end, Ian insisted he had just found out Nikki's father didn't have cancer. It was all a lie. The man was perfectly healthy. He had never been hospitalized. Furthermore, Sasha revealed Nikki had only seen Bear as a platonic male friend before, nothing more. This shocking revelation made Bear question everything about their love. Returning to the table, Nikki saw Bear's pale face. She pulled out a red velvet box. She gave him a tiger's eye stone. It was a spiritual object symbolizing willpower and confidence. Bear mumbled thanks. He looked her straight in the eyes. He asked, "Do you truly love me most in this world?" She gently said, "Of course I do." So he pressed, "What about your father having cancer?" Nikki's expression changed instantly. She lowered her voice and admitted she lied. But then she went wild. She screamed loudly in the middle of the restaurant. She sat down to talk. She desperately pleaded with him not to ruin their perfect happy date. Nikki then asked why these minor things mattered, especially if they were happy together. Why dig them up? Bear had to bite his tongue. He let it go to avoid further conflict. That night, after making love, they hugged and went to sleep. But in the middle of the night, Bear woke with a start. Nikki was gone from the bed. He suddenly heard giggling from the dark corner of the room. He looked over. Nikki was crouched down, staring at him. She was wearing his sweater. Bear asked why she wasn't sleeping. She didn't answer. She wouldn't return to bed. She suddenly burst into tears. She claimed he didn't love her as much as she loved him. Bear tried to comfort her. He was also scared to death. Powerless. Bear pretended to go back to sleep. After a while, Nikki became offended again. She screamed that he didn't love her. Then she left for a moment. She returned with a bouquet of flowers. Bear thought she would hit him with the flowers, but she gently placed them on the table. She said the flowers were for Sandy, the cat. Then she climbed back into bed beside him. When Bear tried to sneak out, Nikki screamed. She ordered him to stay put. He dared not make a sound. The next morning, Bear was stunned. She had cut off her own hair. She hadn't said a word. He honestly said it didn't look good, but Nikki reacted unusually calmly. She gave him a lunchbox she had prepared herself. When Bear tried to bring up last night's horror, Nikki quickly apologized. She claimed it must have been a nightmare. Then she lunged to kiss him, stopping him from speaking further. Before work, Bear also found Nikki had taped the door shut. It was as if she wanted to trap him in the apartment. He tried to act normal, but Bear had to use all his strength to peel off the tape. Meanwhile, Nikki watched with a chilling smile. Then she suddenly fell right in front of the door. Later at work, Bear opened his lunchbox. He was horrified. Inside were only photos she had secretly taken of him sleeping, or candid shots from afar. When Sasha approached, asking what these meant, Bear had to feign embarrassment. He said it was probably a joke. He then asked what Nikki had said Sasha told her about him last night. Sasha explained they had only spoken once. She found it strange how quickly they fell in love. After a few jokes, Sasha picked up the note Nikki left next to the lunchbox. She flipped it over. It read, "What happened to the cat?" Bear took a few seconds to process. He realized the horrifying truth. The sandwich he had just bitten into was made from Sandy, the cat's meat. The disgust and horror overwhelmed him. He felt extreme nausea. He immediately vomited into the trash can. That evening, Ian asked Bear for a ride home. On the way, they started seriously discussing Nikki. Ian couldn't understand why Bear, who initially thought she was crazy, was now acting like nothing happened. Bear defended that Nikki was better now, but Ian insisted this was extremely dangerous. Trying to change the subject, Bear asked about Ian's party tonight. He wondered why he wasn't invited. Ian was blunt. He hadn't planned to invite Bear. He found Bear's relationship with Nikki too toxic, but he eventually relented and invited him. The agreement was, tonight was only for the guys. Alone in his car, Bear suddenly remembered the magic wishbone. He called the customer service hotline immediately. On the other end was a man's voice. It was extremely indifferent and cold. Bear also asked if there was any way to amend or cancel that damned wish. The man flatly stated that once a wish is made, it cannot be undone. In extreme despair, Bear only wanted to know if Nikki's love was real and if it would last forever. The man replied with a chilling statement, "Yes, as long as you are alive." This answer filled him with dread. When Bear got back to the apartment, he found Nikki in a terrible state. She smelled awful, covered in filth. She awkwardly explained she must have eaten something spoiled. Then she confessed she had been sitting there all day waiting for him. While she went to the bathroom to wash up, Bear dared to ask directly, "Did you really cook the cat's meat?" From the bathroom, Nikki answered blandly, "Yes." A while later, Bear told her Ian had invited him to party with friends. As soon as they arrived at the party, Ian's face clearly showed annoyance and discomfort. Then they all gathered with other friends. They were playing a betting game, drinking, and doing group challenges. During a silly game, Nikki suddenly laughed excessively and eerily. Everyone felt awkward and got goosebumps. Next, it was her turn to play. She began telling a very dark version of Hansel and Gretel. It was filled with disturbing insinuation. The atmosphere became so suffocating, no one knew how to react. Next was Bear's turn. His challenge was to kiss the person sitting next to him. Unfortunately, Sasha was sitting next to him. As soon as Nikki heard this, she instantly jumped up. She pushed Sasha aside. She took the seat opposite Bear after an agonizingly awkward kiss. She started screaming for the whole room to hear. No one would understand how much she loved Bear. Then she turned to scold the group. "You will all die," she yelled. "You'll never experience a bond as intense as mine with my Bear." The entire room fell into a dead silence. Everyone watched the drama with extreme helplessness. Ian was utterly exhausted. He asked bluntly, "What's wrong with you?" Nikki suddenly burst out laughing. She said, "I was just kidding." Everyone was confused. But only seconds later, her mood shifted again. She was caressing Bear's hair. Then she suddenly flinched. It was as if she'd seen something terrifyingly spiritual. She began slamming tables and chairs. Then she grabbed an object. She repeatedly hit herself in the face. She was bleeding profusely. Everyone present was utterly terrified. They begged her to stop. Meanwhile, Bear just stood there. His eyes were completely blank. He knew this crazy behavior was instant karma. It was from his devilish wish. Afterwards, Bear tried to carry her to the emergency room, but she absolutely refused to go in. Back home, they sat opposite each other at the dining table. The silence was suffocating. When Nikki reached to caress him again, Bear recoiled. He asked, "Why do you do this? Honestly, you're scaring all my friends." Nikki immediately said she knew Sasha had feelings for him. Desperate, Bear admitted everything was ruined. Clearly, things used to be normal. To console her, Bear started complimenting her. She said she was beautiful and normal, but his voice sounded more like he was trying to brainwash himself. Finally, he asked, "Do you truly love me?" Nikki stared into his eyes. She said, "Yes, because I'm your weird girl." Those words utterly crushed Bear emotionally. Then they debated whether this could be called true love. Bear admitted he wanted the relationship to improve, but they needed their own space, and she had to go home for at least one night. Hearing this, Nikki burst into tears. She wanted to be herself, but now she couldn't do it anymore, like the old Nikki. But that made her even more furious. She cried and screamed in despair, "I can't be myself anymore." That night, as they lay there, Bear received a text from Sasha. She had urgent news and was driving to his house. Bear carefully tried to slip out without waking Nikki. Then she spoke in a completely different voice. It was the real Nikki, begging him to kill her. She pleaded not to wake the monstrous version of herself. She painfully confessed she never truly wanted to be with him, and all this chaos was entirely his fault. Outside, Sasha was waiting in her car. When she asked about Nikki, Bear cleverly lied, saying Nikki's father was dying. Sasha found it strange. Finally, she commented Nikki looked terrible. Finally, she commented Nikki looked terrible. Finally, she commented Nikki looked terrible. And she urgently needed to see a psychiatrist. This toxic emotional attachment to Bear was unhealthy. After that, Sasha changed the subject. She showed him her admission letter. She had worked tirelessly to get into advanced art. This was her last chance. They both laughed and chatted happily while looking at the letter. The atmosphere seemed to relax. Then Sasha suddenly revealed that Ian and Nikki had an on-again, off-again relationship 2 years. But it was never truly romantic. She also said Bear deserved someone who brought peace to his soul. He casually flirted, saying he needed someone like Sasha. They gazed at each other, then smiled in silence. But, like a horror movie, neither knew Nikki had appeared behind Sasha. Bear froze for 5 seconds. He was too terrified to react. After the attack, Nikki turned to him. She apologized for making him witness such a horrible sight, but she didn't forget to remind him it was all because of his damn wish. But first, he had to help her dispose of the body. While waiting in the car, Bear opened Sasha's admission letter. He was stunned to see she was accepted into the loser art school. This shattered Bear Sasha was gone forever. She never knew her good news. In despair, Bear sped to the store where he bought the magic wand. There, he cried to the shopkeeper. He said Nikki was obsessed with him. He begged the man to cancel the wish. The shopkeeper calmly refused. He said Bear had used his only wish, but he revealed something. If another person broke another wand and wished the opposite, it would negate the original wish. He also implied that if Bear died, the wish would automatically disappear. Bear bought another wand. Then he sped to Ian's house. When Ian opened the door, he saw his friend covered in blood. He was horrified and immediately asked what happened. Bear confessed everything. He wished Nikki would love him crazily. Now it was a horrific reality. Then he pulled out the new wand. He pleaded with Ian to make a precise wish. "I wish I had never wished for Nikki to love me." Ian, thinking his friend was high, broke the wand. He laughed, mocking the situation. But instead of saving his friend, Ian wished for $1 billion. Immediately, money rained down from the ceiling. Ian was shocked. He realized the wands were real. Meanwhile, Bear collapsed helplessly. He had lost another golden opportunity to fix things. With no other option, Bear sped home. What he saw was Nikki, even more mutated. It looked like she was performing a mystical ritual. The sight was traumatizing. Just then, Ian rushed to the house. He yelled, "Bear, I totally believe you now." Bear tried to open the door for his friend, but as soon as she saw Ian, Nikki drew a gun. She shot him, killing him instantly. After killing him, Nikki forced Bear to say he loved her. She even vomited on him, yet she hauntingly repeated that she needed to hear those words. Finally, he said what she wanted to hear. It was to temporarily calm the situation. Then Bear seized the chance. He snatched the gun from her. He promised they would build a happy home together. But as he spoke, he ran into the bathroom. He locked the door. Nikki frantically pounded on it, demanding entry. Inside the bathroom, Bear realized the only way to break this cursed spell was to end his own life. At first, he tried to be brave. He used the gun he took from Nikki, but he was too scared to pull the trigger. Finally, he grabbed all the drugs Sandy the cat had accidentally eaten before. He swallowed every single pill. On the other side of the door, Nikki kept begging him to come out. She promised everything would be fine. Suddenly, Bear heard another magic wand break. He smiled faintly, understanding what was happening. He stepped out of the bathroom. He rushed to embrace and kiss Nikki one last time, but just seconds later, he collapsed to the floor. The drugs had taken effect, causing a fatal overdose. Nikki screamed. She planned to use the gun to kill herself with him. At that exact moment, the real Nikki suddenly became lucid again. She was horrified. She witnessed all the death and devastation around her. Completely broken, she just sobbed. Meanwhile, Bear lay motionless and breathless on the floor.